Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Bobby Sylvester, joined as always by Mike Tagliere. We've got a fun show for you today, talking about high upside running backs and wide receivers. If you don't already follow us on Twitter, we're at Bobby Fantasy Pro and at Mike Tagliere NFL. Tags, what's up, dude?
Oh, nothing much, man. I am looking forward to tomorrow. Bobby and we're going to be getting together in person, actually to play some golf, and I'm going to pay up my end of the bet that I lost last year, and I'm pretty sure you guys are going to be able to see that on the YouTube channel. I think we're going to do some recording in regards to me eating this buttered pizza, so that should be a good time.
For those of you who don't know, I did beat Tags in the contest last year. It was Joe Mixon against Christian McCaffrey. I had McCaffrey, obviously, since he had a big season, and I get to make Tags whatever kind of pizza I want. And it could be disgusting if I wanted it to, but I'm going to make it the greatest pizza ever. So Tags will finally admit to all of you, butter on pizza does taste good.
I mean, I'm hoping for that, to be honest with you. And I'm trying to have an open mind, but my worst fear about this entire thing is that I do like it because, you know, when people introduce things on pizza to me, I'm like, I liked pizza, just like pepperoni or cheese. I was always good with that. And then like you introduce things like bacon or Italian beef on there. And I'm like, I was hesitant to try it, and then I did try it, and I loved it. So now it's like, now I like always want that stuff on my pizza, and it's just that's my concern, is that I'm trying to eat healthier, and Bobby's trying to make me into a fat kid.
Sorry, man. So we're going to get into, our high upside running backs and wide receivers here in a moment. We're going to cover quite a few of them today, but first, Tags, draft accuracy from 2018 came out, and we had this question, okay? Who are you taking first overall if there was a fantasy draft of fantasy analysts for draft rankings? Obviously, if it was in season, we'd all go Sean Corner. He won, I think, 3 straight at one point. Last year wasn't quite as hot, but he's just been a beast in season rankings. Draft rankings, who are you taking 1-1?
I mean, I'd be wrong if I didn't say myself. And I know some people might take that as conceited, but it's more like I've put in the time and I'm ranking the players based on how I draft them because for certain reasons. I understand not everything is going to go the way you want it to, but at the same time, I know I put more time into this than anybody I've ever met. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not people out there that do, but if I had to pick one outside of myself, I'd probably say it's Sean Corner, just because he is like the king of projections when it comes like he figures all that stuff out. I know he's a betting man, or he gambles quite a bit. So he's figuring out the over under, like prop bets and things like that. And, you know, all that stuff comes into play when you're trying to figure out what's the most likely of scenarios. Again, that's not always going to happen, but year over year, it'll eventually add up.
You know, I want to say our friend of the podcast, Jake Seeley, just because he's so competitive, I think he would eat somebody's brain if it helped him win. But, I think he's definitely up there. There's no doubt about it in baseball and football. But I'm taking Scott Pianowski from Yahoo, top 12 over the past 4 years. Before then, when we had a different methodology, he was number 2 over the previous 5 years. He's as consistent as they come every single year. Last year, he finished number 3 on running backs and number 4 for wide receivers. And Tags, you did beat me this year. You won by 25 spots overall. Last year, I beat you by 22 spots overall. So you're the current champ. I get my payback tomorrow, though.
Well, I look forward to it. I'm going to beat you on the golf course, though. I know that's going to happen.
I mean, you did it at Top Golf, and I played left-hand, and you still didn't beat me, so...
Well, I mean, we're going to play on an actual course where you actually have to hit the ball further than, like, 50 yards.
I think you need to give me at least 1 stroke on every hole for me to have a chance.
We'll see.
So, to go with the theme of today's show, we did some crowdsourcing. So we asked a ton of people on social media, on our Twitter account at FantasyPros, if they had a choice between these, tier 3 running backs, which one do you think has the most upside? Not who would you take, but who has the most upside? Okay, so Nick Chubb, Damian Williams with the Chiefs offense, Dalvin Cook, or Aaron Jones. I think they all have a lot of upside, but who is the most, Tags? And then who do you think the general public would say has the most?
It's close to Nick Chubb, but I'm gonna go with Damian Williams.
That's your pick and what you think the public will say?
No, my pick would be Aaron Jones. But the crowdsourcing, I would say I'm going to go with Damian Williams.
My pick is also Aaron Jones. Crowdsourcing, I'm really surprised by this. They said Dalvin Cook at 30%. He's the leader. Damian Williams at 27. Nick Chubb at 26. And then Aaron Jones down at 17, man. I guess they're thinking like, well, Aaron Rodgers in the offense, so how much can Aaron Jones actually accomplish? I mean, you remember Eddie Lacy, right? He was a top 5 pick for a reason.
Yeah, and Aaron Jones is a lot more talented than Eddie Lacy was.
Yeah. They do have an improved offensive line. They're going to be in the red zone a lot. Aaron Jones can catch passes as well. Mm-hmm. I would not be surprised at all if he finishes in the top 5 this year.
Yep.
I guess you could say the same for Chubb, because they've got a pretty good offensive line in Cleveland. Mayfield's a great quarterback. I don't know if he's quite as talented as Aaron Jones, and I know Baker Mayfield's not quite with Aaron Rodgers yet.
Yeah, I like Chubb, but obviously their offensive line lost a few players. The left tackle position is not very good at all. Moving to Austin Corbett on the offensive line, trusting him to be a starter now. There's some concerns I have about that with that Cleveland offensive line. And as a matter of fact, they weren't even very good for Nick Chubb last year. That was one of the worst offensive lines in football in terms of what they gave their running backs before contact. But Nick Chubb dominated the yards after contact. Like, he was the league leader, and it wasn't even all that close. So yeah, they didn't create much space. He did a lot of that on his own. So that's my concern about Chubb, is that offensive line. And he's not as good of a receiver as Damian Williams is or Aaron Jones is. So that's why I think that I would put Aaron Jones and Damian Williams ahead of Nick Chubb in terms of pure upside.
So, Tags, you know how much I love Dalvin Cook. I've got him as my number 8 fantasy running back, I believe it is. But I don't think he really has that top 3 fantasy upside like Aaron Jones and maybe Nick Chubb. I don't think probably Nick Chubb, because I think Duke Johnson is going to have a role in the offense this year. And Aaron Jones could just be a true 3-down workhorse type of guy. But the thing with Dalvin Cook is, I don't love the scheme. They threw 600 passes last year, and I don't love the offensive line. Now, Dalvin Cook is more talented than anyone on this list. I would say it's not even close, but I don't think he has as much upside. And Damian Williams would be number 4 for me. I love the offense, but I'm not convinced that if you want to be a top 3 fantasy running back, you have to touch the ball 20 times a game. I'm not convinced Williams can touch it 15 times a game.
I'm not convinced that Dalvin Cook is going to get 20 touches a game. Like, that's the thing. That's why I don't think Dalvin Cook, to me, is like, I don't think he's like a massive upside RB1. I don't think that he has a chance to finish top 5, just because Minnesota, it seems like they want somewhat of a timeshare, and I think that's why they drafted Madison where they did. I mean, it was somewhat of a reach, but they definitely felt the need to replace Latavius Murray. Dalvin Cook last year, I mean, even when he was on the field, he posted RB1 numbers just 18.2% of the time. Like, that's not elite level territory. Just to give you an idea, like Ezekiel Elliott, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon, those guys did it 53+% of the time. So it's like he was not even close to that conversation. The wide receivers are going to be heavily involved there. I don't think Dalvin Cook has that type upside. Now, Damian Williams, if he stays healthy, I think that he does have that upside every single week to finish as an RB1.
So, I mean, I get it with Dalvin Cook and everything, but you have to also consider that he was coming back from a significant injury. And they held him back, and then the end of the season, they really started to let him loose. And if you look at him pre-injury, he was that workhorse. He was that 20-touch every single week type of guy. I mean, Latavius Murray isn't there. You can say what you want about Alexander Mattison, but I think this backfield belongs exclusively to Dalvin Cook. I think they're going to go back to the 3 weeks he played before his injury. He had 61 carries, Tags, to go with 10 receptions. That's 23, 24 touches a game, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's yet to be seen. The reason for me with Dalvin Cook is, like, he's been in the year for a few years now, and we have still yet to see him produce at an elite level. Like, we've seen flashes here and there, but we've never seen it completely put together. And I don't know if I have faith in that offensive line. Granted, they drafted an offensive lineman. They're shifting some pieces around, so it could work. I'm not saying it won't, but I can't put him in that top tier.
All right, Tag, same question for wide receivers. We've got 4 of them. You tell me which one you think and which one you think the general public thinks.
Okay.
So we've got T.Y. Hilton, Amari Cooper, A.J. Green, and Keenan Allen.
Okay, so we have actually 3 of the wide receivers I was going to talk about today. We're in that conversation, and T.Y. Hilton is not. T.Y. Hilton has finished as a top 10 receiver once in his career, and it was like as the wide receiver 10. So, like, and they've added playmakers there. T.Y. Hilton should not be considered a top 10 receiver.
I think he's a good bet to do it. He's a lock to be top 20 if Andrew Luck is healthy.
He's a high end 2. He reminds me of like Deshaun Jackson back in his Philadelphia days, where it's like you draft him as a high end wide receiver 2 and you're happy with that because he gives you some some upside to win weeks. But in terms of like pure upside, like who can finish the highest overall at the end of the year of those guys? I mean, it's hard not to say AJ Green. But Keenan Allen
Really? I'm shocked that you're saying that.
But Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper are right there. Like I've continually said that AJ Green is such an underrated actual receiver. Like I love Amari Cooper, but AJ Green does some things that Amari can't. AJ Green is one of he can high point a ball with the best of them. He can go deep. Amari can do that stuff, but Amari's hands have been a little suspect at times. He's not a go up and get it type receiver. He's a guy that's going to create separation and create a big target for his quarterback. Keenan Allen, another one. He's a route running guy, but he's not a red zone guy. So I cannot put those guys ahead of AJ Green, who has 12 touchdown potential.
I'm looking at T.Y. Hilton. So far in his career, wide receiver 23, wide receiver 21, 10, 22, 5, 24, 15. Every single year, except for that one, he was a wide receiver too. That's who T.Y. Hilton is. Keenan Allen, you just mentioned. I mean, they've got Mike Williams. They've got Hunter Henry. Melvin Gordon scores a lot of touchdowns. He's not going to get more than 5 or 6 touchdowns, so that limits his upside. We know he's going to get the targets and the receptions, but I don't think he's a high upside guy. You're right. It comes down to A.J. Green and Amari Cooper. A.J. Green, here's his 4 seasons with 16 games. Wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, wide receiver 8, wide receiver 10. If he's healthy, he's a wide receiver 1, but I don't think he has as much upside as Amari Cooper because I don't see A.J. Green being a top 3 guy. I could see Amari Cooper being the wide receiver 1 this year. He was extraordinary at the end of the season. He didn't even know the Cowboys playbook. If you get him in training camp, preseason, he knows the playbook, and they actually throw him the ball unlike Derek Carr, I'm not saying he's going to be the wide receiver 1, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was.
The expectations for Amari Cooper are kind of dumb in the fact that what people were expecting, and, people talk about his career in Oakland, and I've been, a big...
Forget it. It's a completely different career.
But then they said, but then he went to Dallas and he only had 2 100-yard games. He only had 2 100-yard games when he played 7 games with the team. 7 games. And he joined them in the middle of the season. Do you realize that how hard it is for a wide receiver, even with an entire offseason in the first year of a playbook, first year with a quarterback, they typically don't produce nearly that much. So to ask him to do this in the middle of the season was crazy. So only 2 100-yard games. If he only played 14 games, that is 4 100-yard games. That's better than, I would say, 90% of the NFL. So don't tell me that Amari Cooper was inconsistent in Dallas. Don't tell me that.
All right, Tag, so we're going to move on to the meat of the show here in just a second and talk about those high upside running backs and then wide receivers. First, though, let's talk a little bit about our draft kit and what we can actually give to you guys, because we want to see you guys succeed. Like, we don't just want to, give you the podcast. There's only so much we can do. We have awesome tools on our site, too, and we want you guys to use those tools so you can win. We love getting those tweets at the end of the season. Dude, I won my championship. Thank you so much. And I think the draft kit is one of the best tools to allow you to do that. Tags, can you tell them a little bit about it?
Yeah, basically, instead of searching all over for the work that we've done throughout the offseason, we take the meat of it and the stuff that's really important to you, the fantasy player, and we put it inside this draft kit so you guys can see it. So you don't have to search around for all that stuff. So you can go and find our takes on basically every single player. You have no idea how many players I've written on this offseason and the topics I've written on. So make sure you check it out. Only premium subscribers have access to that. So, on top of getting access to that, you're going to get access to all of our tools that we have, the draft analyzer, the draft wizard with Keeper, with Dynasty, all that stuff, auction values. So many people have talked to me about auctions, basically asking, does the draft wizard work with auctions? Yes. You plug in your settings into it. Legitimately, it will spit out values for you. And then you go into mock drafts, you work on them, and you finesse that. You can move the values around. But the draft kit is where everything kind of, collides.
Yeah, you get the printable cheat sheets as well, customizable to your league. You can sync with your auction draft as it's going on, so it adjusts for inflation as it's happening. And I mean, like I've said before on Reddit, they've said it's basically cheating. It's just a really great thing to be able to help you, dominate your league. And if you want access to this, we've got an offer going on right now where if you're a new user to Yahoo DFS, you just submit $10 to Yahoo DFS, and you're going to get our Hall of Fame subscription for 6 months for free. It's a $65 value. All you have to do is deposit $10 to Yahoo DFS. You can win money with that $10 too. So it's really hardly paying anything, if anything at all. You get access to all our premium features and tools like the draft kit that we just talked about. And you have to be a new user to Yahoo DFS. You can go check that out at fantasypros.com/offer. And our draft kit is at fantasypros.com/fantasy-football-draft-kit. All right, Tags, high upside running backs. And, I've got quite a few of them I want to talk about today, and we'll see how many we can get to. But where are you starting with us?
I mean, we can work our way down through ADP, and to know that Todd Gurley is the 10th running back off the board right now is kind of crazy. But that's where we live. And, when we talk about high upside, I mentioned, about those running backs who, in terms of RB1 performances, nobody, including Saquon Barkley, including Christian McCaffrey, topped what Todd Gurley did last year. Gurley was an RB1, like legit RB1 numbers in 85.7% of his games. Basically, every week you trotted him out there, he's an RB1. You don't find that outside the first round, like that potential, I should say. So it's like, if you want to draft Todd Gurley in the second round as the 10th running back off the board, I say go for it. Is he too risky for a first round pick right now? I guess you could make that argument because, again, you can't win your fantasy league in the first round, but you can definitely lose it. But then again, Le'Veon Bell's going in there. I would take the upside of Todd Gurley before I would take Le'Veon Bell, just because I don't want my fantasy season defined as I got a running back that has touches, but he's mediocre with those touches. So I'd rather take the upside with Gurley. And, if you must, I guess you have to handcuff him with Darrell Henderson, but I don't even think it's a must. I'm willing to take Gurley in the second round.
I agree with that, and I'm willing to take him in the first round. I think I'm higher on Todd Gurley than almost anyone in the industry right now. I mean, Alvin Kamara doesn't get a ton of touches, 275. Who's better, Tags? Who's the more talented running back? Forget the injuries. Todd Gurley or Alvin Kamara?
I like Kamara a lot.
Do you? Okay, I think it's Gurley, man. He has been so far and away the best fantasy asset. That scheme in Los Angeles, they stack the box against the Rams like 15% of the time, by far the best in the NFL. If Gurley's on the field, if he gets 275 touches this year, just 275, he's got like 325, 350 the last couple years. He's the RB1. That's who Todd Gurley is. I think that he has more upside than anyone in fantasy football, more than Barkley, more than Elliott, more than McCaffrey, more than Kamara, David Johnson, whoever. I think Todd Gurley has the most upside, and yeah, he's a risk. Okay, well, what are the chances, Tags, that he's just a bust? 40% maybe? I think that's pretty liberal. I think it's probably 25%, but let's say 40%, right?
I'd say I would honestly say be closer to the 20% mark. I think it's much better than average that Todd Gurley finishes as a stud.
Yeah, here's my point. I agree with that. And here's my point. I asked people on Twitter today, who do you want at the turn? And one of the 4 poll options was Todd Gurley and Melvin Gordon, because Gordon is dropping to the second round now. And that's if you're doing a draft today. Maybe he signs and he goes back. He's the 6th overall pick and everything like that. But Gurley and Gordon, I don't think you can beat that. And I know what people say. I knew you were going to say this, Tags, that you can't win your draft in the first round. You can lose it. I disagree with that. I think you can win your draft in the first round. You're telling me if Todd Gurley and Melvin Gordon are both healthy, and I get both of them, we're talking about the number 1 fantasy running back and the number 5 fantasy running back, then I'm not the favorite in the league?
If they're both on the field, but again,
if they're both on the field. So let's talk about the chances of that. You said Gurley 20%. Let's just put it at 40%. Okay. What's Gordon's bust opportunity? Like 25%?
Melvin Gordon. I think it's 0 if he's on the field.
but there's a chance that he holds out. There's also a chance that he gets hurt. And so we'll say 40% and 30% just to be really safe. All right. And if I get both those guys on the field, there's a 42% chance that I get both those guys on the field. And if I do, I'm the favorite in my league. And it's not to say that the favorite always wins. Maybe it's a 30-40% chance that the favorite always wins. But even then, I am multiplying my odds of winning this league substantially just by drafting Gordon and Gurley. And sure, there's a chance that I finish dead last, but I'm willing to take that risk because it increases my odds of winning the championship.
Well, here's the reason that I'm not totally opposed to it this year, especially at the end of the first round, beginning of the second, because let's walk through the first 10 running backs off the board, shall we? And figure out who is the safest can be. Saquon Barkley plays in a crap offense. We've already talked about that ad nauseum. So, he's going to get those touches, but it's not going to be a high scoring team. So he has a little bit of risk. Ezekiel Elliott is now threatening to hold out. He's not showing up to their camp. Christian McCaffrey, he comes with 0 risk. Alvin Kamara comes with 0 risk. David Johnson.
Oh, I don't think so about either of those guys. Alvin Kamara comes with potential touchdown regression. He scores once every 15 touches, man.
They're going to be RB1s. Those guys, they may not be the RB1 and RB2, but they come with no risk in the fact that if they're on the field, they're performing as RB1s. We have no concern about those guys. So David Johnson, he was someone that was at the bottom end of the RB1 conversation last year. I know they have a new coach. I know they have a new quarterback. There's a lot of moving parts there in Arizona, but the offensive line is still bad. He's going to be 28 years old this year. There's a lot of things with him. Melvin Gordon holding out. Le'Veon Bell, part of a crap team. He's never played behind a bad offensive line. He's going to find that out really soon. James Conner, they're talking about timeshares. Joe Mixon, bad offensive line that got worse now that they have another injury on it. They had an injury. They had someone retire. And then you get to Todd Gurley. And it's these are the top 10 running backs here that are in ADP right now. All we have, legitimately, there are 2 players that we have 0 concerns about, McCaffrey and Kamara. That's it. And I guess Barkley.
It's not like 2005 where we had like Priest Holmes and Sean Alexander and Marshall Faulk, and everyone's like, well, obviously you draft these three because if they play, they're going to get 15 touchdowns and, 1,400 yards.
Yeah, people have asked me, Bobby, now, when do you start to panic a little bit about Melvin Gordon and or Ezekiel Elliott? Like, so what point do you get to? Do we get to the second preseason game and they're still not reported?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
How far do you move them down your rankings? Like, where do they fall then?
Man, I would take Zeke probably 5th overall behind David Johnson. That's assuming Melvin Gordon hasn't signed either. If Gordon signed, I would take Zeke 6th overall. If Gordon hasn't signed, I'd move him down to my running back 12, maybe?
Yeah.
11?
I think they'd both move out of the first round for me. Zeke would be a fine second round pick, and Gordon maybe down to the third, because Gordon is like, he's saying like, I'm not showing up unless you guys give me a new contract or trade me, because I'm not going to show up. Now, Ezekiel Elliott.
I like both these guys, but they're delusional tags. They've been producing, but they are not worth that kind of money. Just remember, Todd Gurley was the most inefficient running back in football with Jeff Fisher, and then Sean McVay made him the best running back in the game. It's the offensive line, it's the scheme, it's everything like that, and the talent has maybe 25% to do with it. Saquon Barkley was amazing in a horrible situation last year, but you can't just put Melvin Gordon in any offense and he'll be a superstar.
No, but here's my issue with this, though. Here's the reason that I think that Ezekiel Elliott and Melvin Gordon are in camp very soon. This is the reason I think that, okay? When you're talking about Le'Veon Bell, do you remember what draft pick they used for Le'Veon Bell, what round it was in?
Early third round, maybe?
Third round pick, okay?
Yeah.
Now, what did the Cowboys use on Ezekiel Elliott?
A first round pick.
A high first round pick. What did the Chargers use on Melvin Gordon?
Mid first round pick?
It was a mid first round. I think it was in the upper half, but it was right there. So therefore, both of these franchise valued the running back position as a high first round pick, and both of those running backs have performed at elite levels. How are you going to draft those guys and like, they performed exactly how you wanted them to. But now we're not going to pay you. That doesn't make any friggin' sense. So I happen to think that both running backs are going to be signed. I think both are going to be playing. But again, if we get to that second preseason game and they still haven't signed, that's when I'm moving them down my boards.
Well, the Cowboys, they've got a really good defense. They've got a really good offensive line, but their front office doesn't really make the best decisions. They're going to do what they do. I think they will pay Zeke, but if they were smart, you can go back and you can look at Alfred Morris and Rod Smith when they filled in for Ezekiel Elliott. Who was more efficient, those two or Zeke? Hint, it wasn't Zeke.
I take offense to that just because I say it's like Adrian Peterson.
I'm just saying the numbers, man. You can say what you want.
No, but this is the same conversation that I tried having with people years ago about Adrian Peterson and Toby Gerhart. You remember how Toby Gerhart averaged more yards per carry than Peterson? And people are like, Gerhart's going to crush. I'm drafting him as a top 20 running back. I'm like, the guy's garbage. He was playing against backups. Like, you don't approach an offense the same way with Adrian Peterson as you do with Toby Gerhart. The same goes for Ezekiel Elliott and Rod Smith and Alfred Morris.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some validity to that as well. I just think running back is primarily a replaceable position. So we agree on Todd Gurley. I want to talk about Leonard Fournette a little bit, just because I think a lot of people automatically assume that he has a ton of upside just because of what we saw his rookie year. He did go for those 10 touchdowns, 1,000 rushing yards in 13 games. And when people think high upside running backs in the second, maybe even third round with Leonard Fournette, that's where he's going in most drafts actually. I think they probably assume, hey, he has a chance to be a top 3 running back. I don't think so. I don't think that he's going to catch more than 25, 30 balls. If you want to be a top 3 running back, you got to catch 60 passes, man.
I don't think it's 60, but if you get into that, I think it's around that 35-40 tier in order to get into that top 10 area. Like that's tip.
Yeah. Barkley had 91 last year. Zeke had 77 last year. Christian McCaffrey had 107 last year. Alvin Kamara, 81. The year before when David Johnson was a beast, he had 80. Melvin Gordon, even last year, was used a ton. He had 50. I don't think Fournette sniffs 40. Maybe he gets 30.
Yeah, well, Fournette, to his credit, like he's caught a lot more passes than I think people expected him to. I want to say he's only played 21 NFL games.
Yeah, and he left the game in 3 of those.
Yes, and he has 58 receptions already in his career. So that's what I'm saying. Like that's literally, I think that he can be involved more.
So that's 3 a game. So maybe, 48.
Yeah, but his offense holds him back. That's why I've slowly I'm trying to figure out that tier because I think that's going to be a very important decision that you make in drafts. Like when you get down to that, that Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Damian Williams, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, that tier, I think that's going to be a very important one to hit. And Aaron Jones is the one
I keep going to him.
I basically started taking him over Fournette. Even though I know Fournette's volume is guaranteed, I don't think that he has the top 5 potential that Aaron Jones does.
You know, I want to talk about someone else in this tier too, Derrick Henry. Same kind of thing. He's not going to catch any passes. And I know a lot of more casual guys are going to get in there, going to say he was so great at the end of last season. They're hearing these reports. The Titans are going to run him into the ground in his contract year. Maybe he gets 320 carries. Even if he does, that's what, 340 touches? That's not a ton for a bad offense.
I mean, 340 is that's kind of a lot. I don't even know if there's, 8 running backs that'll make it into that territory.
Sure, but I'm saying, like, does he have top 3 running back upside? Even if he's the best pure runner in the game. I don't think he is, but even if he is this year, he's not a top 3 fantasy running back.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for him to get there.
Okay, who else do you have in this range, man?
All right, so we talked about a few of those guys, Chubb, Damian Williams, Aaron Jones. I think Devonta Freeman, I have to put him there. So the reason I do is because we've seen him do it before. We know he's a pass catcher. We know that he can get it done on the ground. We know that offensive line in Atlanta was good, and they've gotten even better adding Chris Lindstrom in the first round of the draft. So I feel like this Atlanta team, like, it's a high-scoring offense with a great offensive line. I don't like the addition of Dirk Cutter. I mean, I've been vocal about that, but at the same time, Devonta Freeman is a much better running back than Ito Smith. Ito Smith is a guy. He's just a guy. And
can you believe people putting them in the same conversation? It's driving me nuts, Tags.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense. And this is the last year on Devonta Freeman's contract, if I'm not mistaken. And, they could use him up and kind of move on from there. So I'm not saying that I'm going to draft him as an RB1 or anything like that, but I think as an RB2, he's solid. And I think he does come up, with top 8 upside.
So we know in 2015, he was the number 1 fantasy running back. In 2016, he was the number 6 fantasy running back. In 2017, he didn't play every game, but in terms of points per game, again, he was a top 10 fantasy running back, and then last year he was hurt. So who's to say? If he plays 16 games, he's probably a top 10 fantasy running back, right?
Probably. I mean, again, I have my concerns about Cutter. I really do. That's holding me back because I don't want to anticipate an injury or anything like that, but Devonta Freeman, he's going as the 16th running back off the board. It's kind of fair. I think that I'm willing to take him around the RB 18, but he's definitely after that tier of the other guys we talked about.
Yeah, I'm looking at ADP 15 for Devonta Freeman. ECR has him down at 18, and again, that's expert consensus rankings. So the analysts in the industry versus the general public, and they do have him a little bit lower than the general public. So that's interesting. I'm a fan of Freeman. I don't think he can be that number 1 guy anymore, just because he's not going to catch 100 passes like Christian McCaffrey. He's not Saquon Barkley or, in a great offense like Ezekiel. I don't know. The Falcons do have a really good offense, but offensive line as Dallas has. So I don't know. I think his upside is limited to maybe he gets in the top 5.
I actually have an offensive line article coming out on Friday, and you will find that the Falcons are number 2 behind the Indianapolis Colts for me.
Really? Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah, I have the Cowboys at 3, so I mean they're both right there.
Tags, you know who has a ton of upside, and we haven't talked about him as an upside guy just because, there's a lot of risk here, and there's a lot of other guys that people think is upside players, but we just talked about it on the other show. LeGarrette Blount finished as a top 6, I believe, fantasy running back in this Patriots offense. Sony Michel had 6 touchdowns in 3 playoff games, 336 rushing yards. They just ran him into the ground. If he plays 16 games as the bell cow back for this Patriots team, he could score 20 touchdowns. He could get 1,500 yards. There's a chance that Sony Michel is just like a superstar, and the Patriots use him that way this year.
Yeah, if there's one thing that deters me away from Sony is, like, it depends on the league you play in. If you play in a full PPR format, Sony takes a massive hit. He only caught 7 passes all last year. I don't know why. This really strikes me as odd just because I believe Sony Michel was a solid pass catcher coming out of Georgia. I had no concerns about him playing on third down, but the Patriots clearly don't see him as that guy. So that's my concern with him. But if you play in a standard league, abso-friggin-lutely, Sony Michel comes to a top 5 upside because he can score 15 touchdowns on the ground. I'm attacking that running game. Like, I'm willing to take Sony Michel at his current ADP in like a half PPR format. I'm willing to take James White before his ADP, and I'm willing to invest a backup pick in Damian Harris as my insurance. He's very, very cheap insurance, and he kind of falls into that category. These are all high upside running backs. Like James White last year finishes the number 7 running back in PPR, number 8.5 PPR, and number 11 in standard.
Wow.
So James White, I literally just got done writing a profile on him. I am so much higher on him than...
Not higher than me.
So I was actually just in an analyst draft, and I debated taking him at the end of the 4th round. I had the 9th or 10th pick in the 4th round. It's PPR league. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pick someone else here, and I'm actually going to be able to get him on the comeback around because nobody's high on him. Adam Iser from CBS took him at
what a jerk
at 5-1. So I was upset to say the least. I was willing to take him. I just felt like I just played games. I basically wasn't. I didn't think that someone would take him, but I think people are starting to catch on. The James White, fantastic RB2 for your fantasy team.
So how high do you have him in your rankings?
He's someone I keep moving up. I mean, like I'm moving him up. Like I think I'm gonna wind up ranking him above like. I don't know if I want to put him above Kerryon Johnson, but that's the territory he's going in.
Yeah, that's where I've got him. RB 22 right now, just behind Chris Carson. I've got Derrick Henry at 20, so he's up there for me, man.
Yep, I would take James White over Derrick Henry in a half PPR format. I think that's where I'm going. And, you know, some people are going to like literally be like laughing through the radio right now if they're listening to the podcast, and that's fine. But trust me when I say that, you know, if you've heard you don't want a Patriots running back because they're inconsistent, I want you to read this article that I'm going to be coming out with. It's a player profile specifically on James White, and I felt the need to write this. It wasn't like a planned article, but it was more like I need to write this because I need people to understand why James White is a screaming value right now.
So Tags, I'm looking at the rankings right now on James White. You can just type in, you know, James White on FantasyPros and then click on the little rankings tab there, and you can sort it by experts in terms of their accuracy, in terms of, you know, what they have him ranked, their site affiliation, or what have you. Did you know Dan Harris is the highest of anyone on James White this year?
I did not know that, but
we need to get him on the show.
We do, abso-friggin-lutely.
Yeah, I just did a baseball podcast with him last night, and it was a lot of fun, but I think he's ready to talk some football, too.
I'm happy to hear Dan's there because Dan's one of the most accurate in the industry.
Yeah, and you just said Sean Corner
yep.
would probably be your number one beside yourself. He's really high on James White. He's in the top 10 experts on him out of, I think, 120 so far.
Nice. It's good to hear. I'll always take those guys on my side.
All right, Tags, we're going to get to your next upside running back here in just a second. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the sponsor of today's show, PristineAuction.com. So today is Wednesday, which means the classic auctions end this evening. So you better believe I'm going to be paying close attention, folks. There's over 14,000 auctions ending tonight for items that would fit right into your cave. You can be sure there's going to be some values there. Like last week, I saw someone landed a signed Patrick Willis helmet for $62, a signed Marlon Mack jersey for $37. Guys, it's free to sign up and bid. And when you do, make sure to enter Fantasy Pros as the registration code. You'll see it right there at the top. That'll get you $5 off the first item that you win. Again, it's PristineAuction.com, PRISTINE auction.com. All right, Tags, let's go with a couple more running backs, and then we'll jump on over and talk some upside wide receivers.
You know, I don't want to get into handcuffs because we've talked about a lot of those guys, you know, about the guys like Darrell Henderson. We've talked about, you know, Carlos Hyde as a handcuff. We've talked about Damian Harris a lot. But another starter that's not being drafted like he has any upside, and this sounds weird coming from me, but Lamar Miller. I can't.
You're going to have to explain this one, man.
I mean, so when you're looking for a potential stud, you're looking for somebody who plays for a team that's going to score an awful lot of touchdowns. And the Texans should, you know, they're going to be a top 12 scoring team. The question is, what's their ceiling? You know, with DeAndre Hopkins healthy, with Will Fuller healthy, with Kiki QT added to the offense, they did draft a couple offensive linemen. You know, they're going to have a competition, and they're going to mix and match a lot of offensive linemen. And I'm still not like completely sold on that offensive line, but I give them credit for trying and at least saying that our offensive line has been terrible. Lamar Miller continually posts RB2 numbers even with that terrible offensive line. So if it's upgraded at all, if you have Will Fuller out there stretching the defense, pulling a safety, DeAndre Hopkins can't be single covered. So we're getting to the point now with Deshaun Watson where the Texans have to say, do we want him running the ball around the goal line? You know, obviously with the ribs last year, you know, we want to preserve his career. We want him to last a long time. Lamar Miller's in the final year of his contract. Deontay Foreman, I know some people are high on him as a sleeper, but for me, he's someone we've never seen anybody come back from an Achilles tear. Okay. Never.
I think it's Crockett of anyone if anyone's going to replace Miller.
At any position. And Deontay Foreman, it's not like he was a guy that was a can't miss prospect even before the Achilles tear. So I'm not buying it. I think Lamar Miller is someone that comes with RB1 upside. And right now he's going as the 31st running back off the board.
Okay. So you think he can finish top 12? That's what I was going to ask you about. Because in his career, he's never had 300 touches in a season. I don't think that the Texans would stretch him out that much. I mean, he played 14 games last year. He got 235 touches. So, I mean, over under 260, I think is pretty safe to say. I think to be an RB1, he'd have to get 320 touches.
I don't even know if he needs to get there. I really don't. I think that he can get there without it because, again, I don't know if there's going to be 12 running backs in the NFL to get there, and Lamar Miller can be efficient. We saw him actually get better over the second half of last year. There was a time where he was producing like borderline RB1 numbers. So, again, with this offense, with everyone healthy, we've never seen that thing move as a machine, and they're going to run the ball. They have to.
Tags, you're right, man. I'm looking at a 6-game stretch Lamar Miller had last year between weeks 7 and 12. He had 100 yards per game in that stretch. Now, he wasn't scoring touchdowns, so nobody noticed. And he's never going to catch passes. He had 25 receptions last year, but I think there is some upside there. This Texans offense is really good. We're talking about Deshaun Watson as potentially the best fantasy quarterback this year. Most people are going to say Mahomes. You and I like Rodgers. Lock's up there too, but of the guys with a chance to finish QB1, Watson is in that conversation for sure. It depends on how much of a step forward this offensive line takes because it was horrible last year.
Yep, that's basically where I'm at with it. And, like that's what's going to keep him from the top 8 territory is like the lack of catching passes. But at the same time, looking for a low-end RB1 potential from a guy that you're drafting as outside the top 30 running backs. I feel like you have safety built in with Lamar Miller as like a low-end RB2, and I feel like you're getting the upside of a low-end RB1.
I think that's a good call, man. Yeah, you kind of talked me into something there. I'm not going to draft him much higher just because I can't slide him ahead of, Kenyon Drake, David Montgomery, but he's someone I wouldn't mind getting now. I'll say that.
Yeah, he's actually someone that I might wind up ranking above David Montgomery, just depending on what we see in preseason.
All right, Tags, I'm going to go back to a player that we haven't talked about really in the past month, which is kind of crazy because he was my guy. The David Moore of today, the Jeff Swaim or whatever. It used to be Chris Carson. Where I wanted to draft him in every league, but then this knee flared up, and now they're saying, we want to split carries between Rashad Penny and Chris Carson. That's what we all thought last year. Like, at the very most, Chris Carson was going to split carries, and then he ran away with the job because he's unbelievably talented. He's a great running back. I think there's a chance that he takes this running back position all over by himself like last year. I mean, Penny was still involved, but it wasn't a 50-50 split. If Carson is the lead back in this Seahawks offense that runs the ball 30, 32 times a game, I think Chris Carson has top 6 or 7 running back upside.
I think Carson and Penny can both be in that conversation. I mean, like even last year with Carson there, with Penny, with Mike Davis in the mix, Mike Davis finishes an RB2 40% of the time. Like, that was in PPR formats. Mike Davis was actually, he provided more value than people think, and now Mike Davis is gone. He's in Chicago. He comes with upside as a backup there in Chicago, too. But Rashad Penny and Chris Carson, I think they're both going to have fantasy relevance this year. I think they're both going to be startable, but Penny is the one that's coming out obviously cheaper. We're slowly seeing Chris Carson fall down draft boards, though. Like, now he's down to the 27th running back off the board, whereas earlier in the offseason, he was around that RB20 range. So we're starting to see people back off after hearing about this knee surgery or whatever procedure he had on his knee.
All right, Tag. So before we go to wide receiver, we're going to play a quick little game here. I've got some running backs. This is what if the starter gets injured. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to name the player. You tell me what their upside is if the starter gets injured and they take over as the lead back. You ready? Darrell Henderson.
Top 10.
Top 10? I'll say RB1. You don't think so?
I think it would be somewhat of a timeshare between him and Malcolm Brown. I think Henderson would receive most.
I think it's possible, but I think there's a chance that Darrell Henderson would be the best fantasy football player in the game.
I'm just thinking, like, if Todd Gurley got hurt out for the year, where would I rank Henderson? Top 10 running back.
Okay. I think that's fair. I'd take him in the first round, no doubt. I think he'd go in the top 5 picks. There's a little bit of risk there, but I think he has a chance to be the best. What about Royce Freeman? Let's say Philip Lindsay gets hurt. Not
too super excited. He'd be an RB2 for me. I
think he could be top 12, but I'd rank him as an RB2.
Yeah, he'd be an RB2 for me. I'm just not too excited. He's not involved very much in the passing game. It's going to be a lower scoring offense. Royce Freeman, I'll say high end RB2.
Okay. Alvin Kamara gets hurt. What does Latavius Murray become?
Yeah, he's an RB1 every week.
RB1, so top 5 RB1?
I won't say top 5.
I wouldn't draft him as top 5, but he could be.
He goes in that top 10 territory.
Yeah, and it's a lock for me, absolutely. Yep. All right, Damian Harris. Let's say Sony Michel's gone.
It depends on the format. If it's PPR, I'll say high end RB2. If it's standard, low end RB1.
Okay, I think he'd be like Nick Chubb.
That's why I like Damian Harris so much in drafts, where it's like you can get him a lot, like tons cheaper than Darrell Henderson. Like I'm talking like 5 rounds difference, and I think both of them are similar in the fact that in terms of the upside they present. And New England is like proven. And whereas with the Rams, everybody expected John Kelly last year, including us. We were one of those people that we wanted the backup to Todd Gurley, and we thought it was John Kelly. it could very well be that Darrell Henderson isn't the player that they hoped he'd be. It's possible. Whereas Damian Harris, we know that's like a replaceable position. We saw Stephen Ridley walk into that role. LeGarrette Blount, who's been bad everywhere else in his career.
He was bad even when he was there. He just produced for fantasy
touchdowns, right? And then and then we watch Sony Michel, and like everybody just walks in that role and scores points. So Damian Harris would walk into like must start material.
Let's say we find out Darius Geis they're just going to shut him down for the season. His knee's still not ready. Adrian Peterson, what's his upside?
He's a low-end RB2 for me. Yeah, even last year, he was an RB2 or better 37.5% of the time, which means like...
Really?
Yeah, it's lower than I thought. I mean, that's in a PPR format, so PPR obviously...
He had 1,000 yards rushing, man. He had 8 touchdowns. It must have all come in chunks.
There was some big games he had in there, and then there were some terrible games he had mixed in.
All right, Damian Williams goes down. Would you even rank Carlos Hyde in your top 24 running backs, even being in this offense? Because I don't know if he would get the workhorse role.
No, I would rank him as a low-end RB1. I think that I think that he's a must-play if something happened to Damian Williams. Like, they brought in Carlos Hyde. And
I mean, I guess he did handle, what was it? You look back at last year, 22, 16, 23, 22, 17 carries in a game. So,
and he showed the ability to catch passes in Kyle Shanahan's offense, so he can do that. It's not that he's very efficient, but Darwin Thompson is not a workhorse running back. So I think Carlos Hyde is the only one that can handle, that 15-plus touch role. So he would definitely be the one, and I'd rank him as a low end.
Here's the thing. In the preseason, 1 or 2 running backs gets injured, out for the year, every single year. What if it happens to Kenyon Drake? I think people would go nuts over Kalen Ballage. I wouldn't rank him in my top 35.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be a starter, so I'd be forced to put him in there. But he'd be an RB3 flex player.
I mean, you'd rank him over Royce Freeman, over Tariq Cohen?
Not Tariq Cohen. Royce Freeman, yeah.
I wouldn't rank him over Freeman, Rashad Penny,
no.
Tevin Coleman,
yeah,
Tariq Cohen.
Yeah, he's an RB3 flex player. He's not exciting.
All right, let's say James Conner gets hurt. Jalen Samuels.
We don't know who the backup is, if it's Snell or Samuels.
Yeah, I mean, his ADP's running back 45 right now. That's like he's being drafted in the top 120, and we don't even know if he's the backup.
Snell is down at 66. I would take, at the cost, I'd take Snell. He's the one who actually showed in college the ability to handle a workload, whereas Samuels is like a converted tight end. And
they spent on Snell. They spent a 4th-round pick, I believe.
Early 4th.
If I had to choose between these two at pick 140, they're still both on the board, I'm taking Snell.
Yeah, I think I would probably lean Snell right now.
Mark Ingram goes down. Justice Hill.
We don't even know if he would have the backup job.
I know. It would probably be Gus Edwards. I would think they would try to do that and then just use Hill for maybe 12 carries and 6 targets a game.
But someone's going to get cut. They can't carry Mark Ingram, Justice Hill, Kenneth Dixon, and Gus Edwards. So I happen to think...
I think Dixon gets cut, man.
I don't know. I mean, if he does, I expect Dixon to latch on with another team really quick.
Agree. I'd love to see Dixon get some touches, but I just believe in Justice Hill too much to think that'll happen. Yeah, so Justice Hill I would probably put high-end RB3, low-end RB2.
He's like that Tariq Cohen territory, probably, and you hope for upside for more, but yeah.
All right, David Johnson goes down. Chase Edmonds.
RB2 in that offense.
Yeah, I think RB2 as well. Let's go with one more, then we'll move on to wide receivers. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go 2 more because there's a really interesting name here. First, we'll go with Raquel Armstead because Leonard Fournette is, I think most people would say he's the most likely scenario here. Except it wouldn't be he's out for the season. It would be, yeah, he might miss week 1 and then he misses 6 weeks.
No, it'd be like that Kalen Ballage thing where I think it's like an RB3.
I think so as well, just because who knows. And then the final one, I love this Colts offensive line. I love their offense. If Marlon Mack goes down, what do you think about Spencer Ware?
I don't, again, he's someone that I think might lose the job to Jordan Wilkins. I think Jordan Wilkins got better as the year went on. And either way, Nyheim Hines is hanging on to that pass catching role. So, I mean, they're just looking for a 1-2 down back. So, yeah, you're looking at like low end RB2, high end RB3 if he did take that job.
Yeah, let's go high upside wide receivers. You said we already talked about a couple of the guys on your list. So let's move out of that, top 15 tier and then just jump right into the tier 4.
Yeah, Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks is being drafted as the 16th or 17th wide receiver off the board. He just fell into the mid to the late 4th round in the draft that I'm doing, and I thought that was far too low. Like, the guy continually posts numbers. Now, granted, he's not like...
Last 4 years, wide receiver 12, wide receiver 8, wide receiver 7, wide receiver 13.
Like, his second year in LA, and Todd Gurley's hurt, so there's going to be more touchdowns to go around to everybody else. There's probably going to be a little bit more passing just because it's the same offensive system. They're not going to be running as much again with Gurley. I don't see what's not to like about Brandon Cooks. Like, I think his upside is high. I like Julian Edelman as a wide receiver too, but I think Brandon Cooks comes with a much higher ceiling.
I agree with that. In fact, I would put Cooks in the higher tier with Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs,
Agreed.
Keenan Allen, T.Y. Hilton. And then I think there's a huge drop-off. My wide receiver 16 is Robert Woods. But after that, wide receiver 17 is completely up in the air. You got Julian Edelman, Kenny Golladay, Tyler Lockett, Chris Godwin, Cooper Kupp. I'm just reading straight down ECR, not my rankings. And there's a huge drop-off, man. I would love to get 2 of these top 16 guys. And then after that, I'm just going to wait. And I'm going to grab whoever drops out of Chris Godwin, Allen Robinson, Mike Williams, Sammy Watkins, Corey Davis, Marvin Jones, Golden Tate. Get 3 of those guys.
That's a good call. I like that call because I don't like drafting receivers in that range. You always feel dirty, right? Like I don't know if I feel great about Godwin. I don't know if I feel like totally great having Mike Williams as my wide receiver too. I mean, these guys have...
As much as I love Godwin, his price is just too high now.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where it's so tough to draft him. I think I took him at the beginning of the 5th round in this draft I'm in. So I'm not totally against him, but he's a back end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3.
Yeah, that's a good price. I just don't see a big difference between him and, Allen Robinson, who's going 2-3 rounds later.
That's kind of how I feel too, and that's why I debated doing that, and I kind of screwed that up. But I think Allen Robinson is being undervalued. I think Alshon Jeffrey is being undervalued. Those are 2 guys that I have on my list as regard to high upside options. Like we've seen Allen Robinson do it before with Blake Bortles in a bad offense. We've seen Alshon Jeffrey, do it with the Bears. We've seen him do it with the Eagles. Like he hasn't been extremely healthy the last couple of years, but it's like he's coming back.
Or ever.
He's coming back healthy. Carson Wentz is coming back healthy. Wentz can't run as much as he used to, so you might see those pass attempts. Deshaun Jackson is going to pull a safety. So Alshon Jeffrey's going to see a lot of man coverage, and he's a difficult man to cover in that type of scenario.
So I'm looking at Alshon Jeffrey, and that's a great name. I didn't have him on my list, but I really should have because he was wide receiver 9, wide receiver 12 in 2013 and 2014. That's the last time we've seen him fully healthy for a season. In the last 4 years when he's been playing hurt, though, if you average it out to per 16 games, we're looking at 73 receptions, 1,043 yards, 7 touchdowns. And then you look in the playoffs and he's been even better. Despite playing with like one shoulder, Alshon Jeffrey has wide receiver 1 upside, man.
Yeah, he only played 13 games last year in and out with Nick Foles and Carson Wentz, and he finishes the wide receiver 26. Like I don't know why people don't like Alshon Jeffrey.
Big risk for sure, but like even if he misses those games, it's not like
you can find replacements at receiver.
This is how I feel about rankings, right? Like, I understand you want to sort it by fantasy points, but when a guy is out, you replace him with replacement level. Mm-hmm. You're not getting wide receiver 26. You're getting wide receiver 26 plus the replacement level, which really means Alshon Jeffrey's a top, 17, 16 wide receiver last year.
Yeah, I mean, in a points per game, he would be top 20, and that's basically where I'm at. He's been top 20 with the Eagles each of the last 2 years. So,
but you also get rid of Nick Foles, and it's all Carson Wentz.
Exactly. You have to think that Carson Wentz is going to upgrade that offense. If he's healthy for a full season. So, he's definitely in that conversation. Allen Robinson, you talked about, and Mike Williams, he's definitely in that conversation. Like he's a guy that we already saw catch 10 touchdowns on 66 targets. He's someone that can catch double-digit touchdowns and nobody would blink. But the question is like, what's his target ceiling? with Keenan Allen healthy, with Hunter Henry in the lineup. It's difficult for us to project that right now just because we've never seen it. But Mike Williams he's one of the rare instances where you can get down there in the wide receiver 30 range and find, low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 potential. And I think Mike Williams, he does belong in that conversation.
You know who he is? He's Des Bryant, man. You remember what Des Bryant did as a third-year player? Mike Williams is third year, right? Or is he second?
This will be his third year. His first year was like a couple games he played because of that back issue, but last year was essentially his first full season.
Yeah. So you know what Des Bryant did as a third-year player? He went from 63 receptions, 928, 9 touchdowns, so a little better than Mike Williams' season, and he exploded. 92 receptions, 1,382 yards, 12 touchdowns. Next season, 13 touchdowns, 16 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. Could be Mike Williams, man. He could be a top 10 wide receiver, top 5 maybe.
Yeah, and he's tied to Rivers. That's never a bad thing. Rivers is going to toss touchdowns.
Yep, he is. And yeah, Keenan Allen's in the way, so maybe his upside's a little bit limited because of that, but if anything was to happen to Keenan Allen...
Yes, that was about to say. If something happened to Keenan Allen, Mike Williams is locked in as a wide receiver 1 every week.
Yep, I agree with that, buddy. I want to talk about someone we haven't touched on very much. I like Curtis Samuel, but I think DJ Moore has a ton of upside. Cam Newton was playing with a bum shoulder last year, and if you look at his game log, Cam Newton, I know he didn't finish with the best numbers. He was one of the best passing seasons of his career in terms of efficiency, and that's despite him being just a total bum at the end of the year. In the first 12 weeks, Tags, he had multiple touchdowns in 11 weeks. He was hauling. I think Cam Newton can still be very good. Now, that's if he's healthy. He's not going to run as much as he used to, so that caps his upside, but in terms of passing, he's continuing to get better if he's healthy. And DJ Moore, he's kind of like Steve Smith, and Steve Smith had some really good seasons. I could see DJ Moore exploding now that Cam Newton can throw it more than 6 yards to a wide open McCaffrey.
Yeah, I have DJ Moore on my list as well. As much as I'm not drafting him because like his price is built in where people are expecting a jump, I'm not paying that price, but I do think he comes with massive potential because there's nobody else in that receiver that has a chance at 130 targets. I think DJ Moore has a chance to get 130, 140 targets in that offense. Now, do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. And that's why he's like more of like a high-end wide receiver 3 for me. That's going to have some volatility in his game, but he does come with massive potential because he's the clear-cut number 1 in that offense. Like he is the best receiver they have on that team. I do like Curtis Samuel as a player. He's fine, but he's also not a guy that you're going to give 100 plus targets to. So yeah, DJ Moore does come with massive potential.
Tags, this 5th tier is just kind of fool's gold. I'm looking at it. You got Tyler Boyd, Will Fuller, Christian Kirk, Cortland Sutton. A lot of guys are going to be like, oh, there's a lot of potential there. D.D. Westbrook, right? I don't see any potential in any of these guys. Like best case scenario, they're a low end wide receiver 2. That's about where they're being drafted.
Yeah, I'm not buying into that tier either. I mean, Will Fuller has some upside, sure, because we've seen that already. But
does he?
He does.
He's the wide receiver 3.
But that's why he's like an ideal wide receiver 3 on your fantasy team. He's going to come up with ups and downs. Like he could finish as a top 20 receiver, and I wouldn't be surprised. But he's not going to perform on a weekly basis that a wide receiver 2 would. You know what I mean? Like Fuller.
He's also, I mean, everyone's acting like he tore his ACL in week 8 last year.
Yeah.
You're acting like he's just going to automatically come back and be ready for week 1.
That's a good point as well. Like it's very possible that he's not 100% by then.
Yeah. And I'm not buying Christian Kirk or Cortland Sutton at all. I think Kirk has some upside, but not really with this rookie quarterback. And Larry Fitzgerald's still there. Andy Isabella, I think maybe more impactful this year as a rookie just because he's that gimmick super fast guy. Like Curtis Samuel, he could take any play to the house, and I think he will 5 or 6 times. I love him for best ball.
But yeah, I think you're right about that tier. Like you have to go a little further down to search for guys with like massive potential that come with some more risk.
I don't know if I see anyone like that. I mean, maybe Geronimo Allison. Who are you talking about here?
Allison is definitely a name that I have down there. That he would be on that high potential. Like he's got wide receiver 2 upside. Being drafted as a
I mean, obviously Tyreek Hill. He was the number 1 wide receiver last year in fantasy. Who knows how long they'll suspend him?
Right. Yeah. I almost take him out of the equation because that's just like but. N'Keal Harry, as much as I don't like him.
Have you heard him interviewed? He's one of the most likable people in the NFL. I like that guy, man.
I don't like his game is basically what it comes down to. I just don't think it translates very well.
I do like it.
So one stat that I came across that does hurt him is that Tom Brady only threw into tight coverage. I think it was 13.2% of the time last year, which was like one of the lowest marks in the league, which means he doesn't like throwing into tight coverage. He doesn't want to turn the ball over. N'Keal Harry doesn't gain separation. That's an issue. He's a rookie. Okay, but going down even further, Traquan Smith and Devontae Parker. Those two guys, like, remember when we talked about Juju and the fact that like Antonio Brown's there, like what's his actual ceiling? And then it's like all of a sudden both of those guys are producing. Okay, Traquan Smith is being drafted as the number 60 wide receiver. I don't even know if he's overtaken Ted Ginn yet, but if he does, it's very possible that Traquan Smith like outperforms his ADP by a long shot.
And I'm fine with drafting Traquan in best ball.
Yeah.
If you're telling me that you're willing to put Traquan Smith in your starting lineup without Michael Thomas going down, I think you're crazy, man. He had those 2 huge games. Besides that, the most yards he had in a single game was 44. The most receptions he had in a single game was 3. I understand he's going to get better as he ages. Maybe, Ted Ginn won't be in his way anymore. And so these things can change, but I would never feel comfortable ever starting him, even in a flex.
Well, I mean, if you go back to when Ted Ginn, not last year, but the year before, when Ted Ginn was playing, he was usable in fantasy half the time. So that's where Traquan Smith comes into me, where it's like, I definitely don't want him as an every week starter, but I think he can give you that bye week replacement value. And then if something did happen to Michael Thomas, we could see Traquan have a massive, massive season. So that's like down here is like, that's what I'm looking for. Like Devontae Parker, he has 120, 130 target potential. It's not going to be sexy in that offense, but if Ryan Fitzpatrick's throwing the ball, I definitely say that he could be a wide receiver 3. And then going down further, Bobby, to mention your boy, as we do seemingly every show, is that David Moore. Definitely there's potential down there, but
I don't think big potential. I don't think he's like an upside guy. I think if he plays, he's a good wide receiver 3.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. Like, to totally outperform that. Like, he did have big weeks last year, and like Russell Wilson continually throws like a lot of touchdowns. I want to say he led the league in touchdowns in 2017, and then 2018 he threw many more than
only with 32 of them, which is a far cry from Mahomes' 50, but it did lead the league.
Yes, and I mean he's seemingly always over the average of what he's supposed to be. So David Moore can definitely be a touchdown machine. Where it's like, can he have a Mike Williams-esque season with some more targets? Sure. So that's why I say wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2, even possible at times, just depending on, how they view Tyler Lockett, how many targets go to him.
So Tags, I'm looking at the breakout guys from the past few years at the wide receiver position, and it seems like every single one of them was either what we're talking about, a lot of these third-year guys or younger guys that just kind of break out, or it's a star receiver gets hurt and Tyler Boyd fills in and just becomes really good because he gets a lot of targets. And so we need to talk about what if these guys get injured. And rather than me asking, what would happen, because there's no clear, wide receiver 1 alpha replacement, I just want us to list a few players. We don't need to talk about them a ton, but people that you could see taking that kind of leap if someone was to get hurt. Like, for instance, Geronimo Allison, we brought him up. If Devontae Adams was to get hurt, I think Geronimo Allison could be a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, for sure. I think Anthony Miller is definitely someone that I think Anthony Miller has breakout potential, even if Allen Robinson.
In both ways, yeah.
Anthony Miller's.
He could be better than Allen Robinson. I think he might be as good of a football player.
Yes, I love Anthony Miller as a player. The question is, like, how many targets can he get? And if something happened to Robinson and Miller's healthy, like, that's going to lead to a lot of targets for him. Like, people don't realize that Taylor Gabriel had 92 targets last year. Taylor freaking Gabriel.
He was actually pretty good too. He caught a lot of them.
He did. That's the thing. He didn't score many touchdowns. There was like a whole bunch of negative touchdown regression there. But Anthony Miller, like, if he's healthy, not walking around with a shoulder hanging off and a broken foot, Anthony Miller could be very, very good.
The one that I want to talk about, and this is really going to surprise people as an upside guy, but I'm really not joking at all. I think if DeAndre Hopkins was to get hurt, Kiki QT catches 100 passes. I'm not saying it could happen. I'm saying I would expect it to happen. We're talking about a guy who, as a rookie, he saw so many targets, man. He saw more targets when he was on the field than DeAndre Hopkins, Tags.
Yeah, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, obviously I'm not saying that's going to happen. He had, remember, in the playoffs, 14 targets, 11 receptions, 110 yards. That doesn't even get mixed in with the stats that everyone's looking at. This guy is a target machine. And if Hopkins was to go down, you got Deshaun Watson passing the ball. Will Fuller is what he is. He's kind of like Tyler Lockett. He's going to get some deep balls. He's going to end up with, 80, 90 targets. And he'll be good. He'll score some touchdowns. But Kiki QT is he would become the target machine.
Yeah, I mean, QT, he would definitely become a target machine. Lamar Miller's stock would rise. Will Fuller's stock would rise because losing Hopkins, that takes away a lot of targets. So,
and Hopkins is the most talented receiver in the game, but Watson is going to do Watson things. He doesn't need a wide receiver 1 to be, put up points.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, who else do you see? Maybe James Washington behind Juju?
He would see a ton of targets. But, I mean, what about someone like DK Metcalf? Like, I'm just looking for guys that are tied to elite quarterbacks that just always produce fantasy superstars. And it's like, if something happened to Tyler Lockett, does David Moore become all of a sudden a stud, or do they go to DK Metcalf? DK Metcalf, we know, can create splash plays. And if he's getting targets, then obviously he can live up to that. Like, there's definitely some parts of his game that you want to be better. But, I mean, when we're looking for upside, like guys that could, like, get a ton of targets with an injury, Metcalf has to be there, right?
Here's his ceiling and his build is Mike Evans. Do you remember what he did as a rookie, Tags?
Yeah, Mike Evans, like, wasn't he a top 10 wide receiver?
He was wide receiver 11, but he really didn't even start playing well until week 7 when they really started involving him. Week 7, he went for 124 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then the next week, 125 and a touchdown. 209 and 2 touchdowns the following week. So from week 7 to week 15, he was on a 18 touchdown, 1,271 yard pace. It's a different offense. They don't pass the ball as much. I think Metcalf is more raw, but in terms of athletic ability, obviously we know Metcalf is more, so I could see it, man. I think it could happen.
Yeah, with the arm of Russell Wilson, it definitely doesn't hurt.
I like Paris Campbell behind T.Y. Hilton because I think Paris Campbell is T.Y. Hilton, except more athletic. I think he's bigger. I think he's faster, and he's the eventual replacement for Hilton, who's getting up there in age. If anything was to happen to Hilton, I think Andrew Luck would just pepper Paris Campbell with targets.
I was thinking that it could be even Devin Funchess there. Like, Funchess could see a lot of targets.
It doesn't matter with Andrew Luck, man. I mean, let's go down. You could put Kelvin Benjamin in the Colts offense, and Andrew Luck would find him a way to make him finish irrelevant.
Probably.
Okay, do you have anyone else who fits this description?
Not really off the top of my head that I really feel good about. There's a lot of guys that would obviously walk into more targets, but saying that they're like wide receiver ones, I think it's pretty tough. Unless you could say like someone like Marvin Jones. If Kenny Golladay goes down, Marvin Jones is like, borderline, he's definitely a wide receiver 2.
Yep, I would agree with that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Demarcus Robinson breaks out, if Tyreek Hill's gone, because Sammy Watkins just hasn't done it before. I think it would be Sammy Watkins, but I think Demarcus Robinson would play over Hardman. I'm not really seeing anybody else except, you remember Deshaun Jackson as a rookie, and especially his second year, he was so good. Who's the Deshaun Jackson of this rookie class, Tags?
The Deshaun Jackson of this rookie class?
Yeah. Most dangerous guy with the ball in his hands. He could be the number 1 wide receiver on his team as a rookie.
I mean, are you talking about Marquise Brown?
I'm talking about Marquise Brown, baby.
The only reason I worry about him is the Lisfranc injury that he had on his foot. Like, whenever a player has that injury, that's what always concerns me. But I have a ton of Marquise Brown.
He's pretty far separated from that, man. He's going to be playing in minicamp.
But it was still the calendar year. What I've noticed, and not to say it's like 100% concrete, but I'm saying what I've noticed in like the trends I went and looked back at were that if you had surgery on your foot in that calendar year, you probably sucked. Looking at Julio, Dez, Julian Edelman, like there were some players who just weren't very good that calendar year. So that's my concern. He's obviously a rookie. He's playing with Lamar Jackson, who's not a very competent passer. I do have a lot of Marquise Brown in best ball leagues, though. I think there's going to be some splash plays that you want in your lineup.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I've got some shares just in case. We'll see what happens. Now, Tags, we're going to end the show with this, okay? Every few years, we get a Julian Edelman, a Chris Hogan, one of these random guys from the Patriots depth chart that just blows up because Bill Belichick knows how to use him and Tom Brady's gonna hit him because he's open. Who could it be? Would it be Philip Dorsett, or do you see somebody else?
I think it would be mix and match. I think that people would be searching for that player, but I don't think there is one.
Okay, so you don't think there could be because nobody would have guessed Chris Hogan when it happened. Nobody would have guessed Julian Edelman when it happened. It just happened.
Yeah.
Maybe Dontrell Inman. He was really good when he got picked up. Didn't know the playbook, and they just started throwing in the ball. I know it wasn't with the Patriots, but I think Inman's a player.
Yeah, I actually think Inman is someone who's extremely underrated, and I thought the Colts should have hung on to him. But I definitely think that he's one of those sneaky players where it's like if we see the week 1 snap counts and he's like running starter snaps, I don't even care if he performs. I'm going to tell everybody to pick him up.
I agree with that. He had 810 yards in 2016 with the Chargers, and that was not playing all that many snaps. So I think Inman does have some upside in this Patriots offense. He's the guy I've got my eye on. I know other people are thinking maybe Philip Dorsett, but I've got some Inman shares in best ball tags.
Nice. I kind of like it.
All right, man. That's all for today's show. That was a fun one. I love talking upside. It just gets me excited.
Yes, sir. It was a good time.
All right, guys. And make sure to check out our draft kit. Again, that's fantasypros.com/fantasy-football-draft-kit. And if you want to get that for $10, you can get a Hall of Fame subscription, a 6-month, $65 value. If you're a new user at Yahoo DFS, deposit $10 at fantasypros.com/offer. It's going to give you all of our premium content, tools, and features. And make sure also to check out pristineauction.com. That's PRISTINE auction.com. For Mike Tagliere,